Welcome to the Rock Your Dream Body and Dream Life interview series. Today, I am talking to Mike Samuels. So to tell you a little bit about Mike, he is a personal trainer, diet coach, and amateur powerlifter based in Southampton, UK. He runs healthy living, heavy lifting, and works with clients in a one-on-one and online capacity. He believes in a flexible approach to diet and lifestyle, which is what I'm all about and exactly why we're chatting today. So thank you so much, Mike, for being here today.
That's okay, Sheila. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So why don't we start out by you sharing your perspective or your definition of what it means to rock your dream body and your dream life?
Yeah, sure. So I think obviously for dream body, that's going to be different for everyone. It's going to be one that, you feel good in, but also that you can be kind of confident and proud of. So whether that is, looking like a fitness model potentially, or whether it's just losing a few pounds, getting a bit stronger, building some lean muscle, but basically having a body that, you're comfortable in 24 hours a day. And in terms of lifestyle, I think it's one that you can maintain, you can have flexibility and freedom with. You don't feel like you have to go to the gym, but at the same time, you are motivated to go to the gym and to train and stay consistent. And the same with your diet. So you don't feel like you're forever having to count calories and macros or only eat certain foods, but 80 to 90% of the time, you kind of want to do that and you want to stay consistent with it because it's getting you closer to your goals.
Yes. And I know that that's your specialty, is helping clients to have that flexibility and freedom, but also achieving and then maintaining their goals, which that's the tricky part, right? Is like maintaining it over the long term. So why don't you, go ahead. Were you going to say something?
I was going to say exactly. I think that's half the battle. People can make their goal or get to their goals relatively easily, but it's then maintaining it afterwards that's a difficult thing.
So let's talk about that. So what are some of the first steps, and then what's the process on how you get your clients to their goals and then maintain them with that flexibility and freedom?
I think the first step is always kind of finding the why for people. So why they really want to do it, because a lot of people see perhaps posts on Instagram or Facebook of, let's take an extreme example of like a fitness competitor, and they think, I really want to get to that stage. And I think for something like that, you have to really, really, really want it and actually analyze whether it's worth it to you, because it's a lot of commitment, a lot of dedication. And for the most part, you don't really feel that good in yourself when you're doing it. So if you have got that really strict goal and you do really want to get there, I think that's fine. But for everyone else, I think it's probably a case of just seeing what's important to you and what matters most. So whether that is looking good aesthetically, whether it's being fitter so that you can live longer and spend more time with your family and your kids, whether it's losing a few pounds just to feel more comfortable in yourself. But whatever it is, kind of find the main reason for it and really try and nail that down and work out why you want to achieve your goals, and then come up with some sort of sustainable and realistic timescale and strategy to get there. So the guys and girls I tend to work with are often kind of competitors, or they want to do photo shoots. But even for that, we'll kind of try and do make it a longer time scale so that you allow some room for some slip ups and for some leeway, and you don't have to do anything too extreme or too drastic to get there. And break it down into mini goals as well. So there's no point if you're kind of going from being sort of 50 pounds overweight and wanting to get to the bodybuilding stage, let's say. For me, I would have lots of small goals in there, because while that is achievable in the long term, it's obviously going to be, there'll be ups and downs. If you don't have smaller things that you can accomplish along the way, it's going to be really, really, really difficult to get there. And most people won't, because they don't have that drive and incentive and the motivation on a regular basis to achieve smaller things in between.
So what would be an example of some of those smaller goals? Like if your goal was to lose 50 pounds or, that was sort of like the bigger picture, how would you set that up for them to have those smaller goals?
Well, I think it's important to have both behavioural and outcome-based goals. So outcome being something like, lose X amount of weight or drop this many inches from your waist, things like that. Mm-hmm. And behavioural being things that you can do, they're your behaviours basically. So eat a lean serving of protein at every meal, or eat 6 servings of vegetables every day. So that would obviously depend on the person. But for instance, for someone who was starting from kind of a more beginner level with a lot of weight to lose, it might be something as simple as just get 20 grams of protein at breakfast and try and do that every day for a week. And then when you've done that, you'd introduce another kind of habit-based goal. For a competitor, it might be like hit your macros within 5 grams of each protein, carbohydrate, and fat every day. And obviously they're kind of at that higher level. And so for them, that's a lot more sustainable and attainable than it would be for someone just starting out. And then in terms of like the more outcome-based goals, it might be something like, I'm not so much a fan of losing weight per se, but for someone who has got like 40, 50 pounds to lose, then that could be a goal to have. I wouldn't say every week they need to lose a certain amount, but it might be over the course of a month, try and lose 4 pounds or 5 pounds, so you're averaging a certain amount, or drop this amount off your waist. Or I think another really good one to have, although it doesn't relate to kind of body composition, but like strength and performance goals. So everyone I train does some sort of strength training, whether that's like training in person or online. And so I think even if strength isn't a huge goal for you, having kind of small milestones you can hit every session. So even if it's an extra rep on a set that you did last time, or if it's adding 10 kilos to your deadlift in 12 weeks, whatever, I think that smaller and bigger goals are both quite important, with both habits and outcomes, just to keep you motivated and get to where you want to be.
Yeah. And I love that. I love that you say that about the behavioral goals, because, and actually another interview guest, Kim Murgatroyd, mentioned that as well, about these smaller, more like tangible or understandable goals help us to then naturally lead to the result that we're looking for in the end. If we can celebrate those like smaller milestones, like, drinking a certain amount of water or getting a certain number of workouts in every week, then it's going to lead to that result. And when you have this really big goal, it's almost like hard to be excited about that bigger goal if it's going to take you some time to get there. And the results are not always linear. It's not always like every single week you're going to consistently see these like, big changes. Your body's going through so much during this process that I think it's important to have things like that to celebrate along the way.
Definitely, because I think that, again, the more advanced you get, the slower progress becomes, and that can be quite disheartening a lot of the time. And it doesn't really matter what level you're at. So again, even for some of my competition clients, I'll get them to have smaller goals. And it sounds almost a bit kind of beginnerish, but I don't think it is at all, because human nature, you want to achieve things. And actually, if you're going for a long time, 16, 20, 24-week diet and not having smaller milestones along the way, it's actually quite difficult to keep yourself motivated. So by having things like, an X amount of inches lost, or doing so and so in the gym, then it does keep anyone, regardless of kind of level and how motivated they are, keeps you on track to getting that longer term goal.
Yes. And so for you, again, like flexibility is so important. How do you incorporate flexibility into your programs with your clients?
Well, it depends on kind of what they want to achieve and where they're at, motivation levels and things like that. Always start off with kind of initial questionnaire, just to assess, one, what their goal is, what they need to achieve it. And then I would always look at blending what I'd say would be optimal on paper with actually what's optimal for them. So if you say kind of with different levels of clients, again, someone who is wanting to compete, they're probably going to be able to stick more to what would be optimal on paper, even if it's like a bigger demand on their time or their energy, just because they are more motivated. Whereas someone who's kind of just starting out, you've got to have like obviously a flexible approach. So that might mean that, as big as I am on kind of counting calories and macros, not every client does that, because I don't think everyone's quite ready for that. And actually not everyone needs to. So it would just be a case of introducing some lifestyle changes. So eating more protein, eating more greens, drinking more water, just generally being more active, maybe getting in the gym twice a week for half an hour, even if that's just to do some mobility work, just to get them in that habit of being in the gym, getting motivated to train, and making those small habits they can actually stick to. I think it's rare that you find someone who can completely overhaul their life and do everything theoretically perfectly straight from the off. You have to kind of, I suppose, meet the client where they're at, is the phrase I like, really. So yeah, while I'm often associated with, say, strictly tracking macros and stuff, that's not what every client does, because it's just not going to work for everyone.
Yeah. And I think that's so true for me too. Like I used to primarily only teach the intuitive eating approach, but then as I started to have my own specific goals that I was reaching for, I realized that there are all of these different tools, and depending on how like specific your own goal is at that particular phase of your journey with your body and health, you might need a little bit more structure, but that structure actually gives you freedom, because then you have like specific guidelines to hit that allow you to achieve that goal, but it sort of takes the pressure off. It doesn't have to be restrictive. It's more like just giving you that support that you need to make sure that you get to where you want to go. And I think that's so important to frame it in that sort of a mindset where this is about self-discovery and fun, and really having that exciting why, that bigger reason why you're doing this, versus like, okay, well, I have this very strict plan and I'm counting these macros because I have to restrict myself to that certain number on the scale or whatever that is.
Yeah, I think so. And I think likewise, the same people can go through phases. So I was talking to a client earlier who said, she's wanting to lose weight. She's going on honeymoon. She was saying, I'm really not sure that actually tracking everything is a long-term approach to me. She said, I'm kind of managing it okay, but I'm finding it quite draining, and I'm not sure it's the real way to go. So my response to that was, well, making progress doing it at the moment. You've only got kind of 4 or 5 weeks to go away. So how about if you can do it, we stick to that. And then once you're back, we look at a way that we can maintain it with something that you find more manageable or more enjoyable. So I'd always rather someone have something that they can stick to and have some leeway with, rather than feeling like they're tied into a system. And then as soon as they can't do that anymore, then they think, well, can't do it. I'm failing slightly, so I'm just going to blow it all and go and binge eat and completely fall off the wagon and have 2 weeks of not training and not eating right and all of that. So I'd rather that someone did something that was, I suppose, in theory, 80% perfect, but did it all the time, rather than was half on, half off, like the perfect plan, really.
Exactly. It's like we have this love-hate relationship with structure. I think like we want it, but then when it feels like too much, it feels too restricted, then we fly off the wagon. So it's like finding that balance where you feel like you have enough structure to feel safe, like you're going to achieve your goals, but also it feels free enough to be able to like go do those things that you really want to do in life.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's that idea that when someone's got a strict goal, they almost like, I wouldn't say they like kind of deprivation, but they like having a sense of discipline as well, and knowing that, I have to do this today, and that's my role for the day. And if I do that, I've done well. So for a lot of people, that is tracking food intake, or it is, going to the gym X many times a week. I think almost if you make it too easy, most people think, oh, I'm not going to bother with it today, or I'll make up for it tomorrow. Whereas if there's a bit of discipline, I think most people tend to respond a bit better to that, provided, as I said, there's still that flexibility and freedom there.
Yeah. And it's all about like what you need at that particular phase. Like, I think it goes back to that way of like gauging your progress. Like you were saying, having those smaller goals. When people feel like they're winning, then they can celebrate and be like, I'm making progress today. I did these things I said I was going to do. And then it keeps them on that positive momentum spiral, versus feeling like, I don't have any structure. I'm not sure if I'm doing it well enough, to get to my goal. And then they spiral in the opposite direction.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's why it's important to have goals sort of year round as well. I noticed that for my clients particularly, kind of they'll do competitions or a photo shoot, and then one of my main priorities is to make sure they've got some sort of goal in place as soon as they finish. And actually we kind of start planning that a bit before as well, so they don't get to their goal and then suddenly they think, right, that's it, done. I'm going to throw away all the good habits I made and go back to what I was doing before. Because again, whilst you want to ease up slightly, you don't want them to get to the stage where they're disappointed with their body, or they're not training, or they're massively overeating and kind of undoing all the hard work really. So year-round goals as well is vital, I think.
Yeah. So let's talk about restriction, and this idea that a lot of people think that they have to cut out certain food groups, or like carbs or sugar or anything like that, to reach their goals. What's your perspective on that?
Well, I don't think there's any one food that kind of makes someone fat. I think the only food someone should avoid are obviously things they're allergic to or have genuine medical intolerances to, or potentially trigger food. So if they just really don't feel like they can have just a small bit, they find that, they once they have a taste, they binge on it, basically. And obviously there's a balance as well. So while I often say to people that, calories and macronutrients are the most important factor, there's no way I'd want everyone getting all their calories just from sugars or refined carbs or hydrogenated fats or anything like that. And I tend to go like the 80-20 rule. So 80% wholesome nutrition foods, what we class as healthy, and 20% kind of junk, provided you factor that into what you're eating calorie and macro wise for the day. Obviously, there are personal preferences as well. So I wouldn't say anyone kind of has to eat some junk food within that. If someone wants to eat 100% clean, then they can do. But at the same time, I think there's no need to completely kind of cut anything out of your diet at all, really, provided you've got that sustainable mindset and some way of monitoring your food intake, whether it's tracking or portion control. And really, it comes down to whether you're happy with what you're doing and whether you're reaching your goals.
Yeah. And so this is my perspective on that stuff, and you tell me what you think. But I feel like the body, like when you take those kinds of foods out and then you have them, like say carbs or sugar or something like that, say like on weekends you only have it. Do you feel like the body doesn't really know how to process it when you do add it back in? So that's why it retains water, and that's why people see these negative things that they might be like, oh my God, my body just doesn't do well with those foods. But usually it's because it just doesn't, it's not used to them. If you had them in balanced amounts, like you said, the 80-20, incorporating them regularly, then your body's like, oh, okay, this isn't a big deal. I know what to do with it.
Yeah, I think so. And I think as well, more so perhaps mentally, is that people can't cope with sort of reintroducing something they've banned. And I refer to it sort of like the naughty child syndrome. So if you tell a child that they can't have something, even if they don't really want it, like all of a sudden it becomes their main focus and they almost have to have it, and they complain and they have a tantrum and they cry that they can't have it. And it's the same with foods. I think if you tell someone you can't eat that, like for instance, I used to be sort of very strict on like a paleo approach, and I used to obviously wouldn't have bread, and so all I wanted all the time was bread. And then as soon as I thought actually, you can eat it as long as it's factored in, I kind of didn't really want bread anymore. And I find now I can kind of have a few slices and fine with it. But yeah, as you say, anything, if you kind of cut out loads of sodium, you cut out loads of sugar, then you will probably bloat quite badly when you do have it. So it's one reason why I think you should not necessarily make yourself eat stuff like that, but don't be afraid of having a small amount at the same time.
Yeah. I used to be the same way. So I remember like Saturdays were my cheat day, and I would have like a lot of bread or, some beer, things like that, but I would have it in a massive quantity. And the next day, like literally my skin hurt because it was so swollen. And I realized like, this is not what I want to feel. Like this is not balanced. This doesn't feel good. So that's when I started incorporating it more throughout the week. And then it's not that big of a deal. It's not like this is the last opportunity that I have to have this thing, so I need to eat as much of it as I possibly can. I can have it tomorrow again if I want,
That's the big thing. I think I always say to clients that, foods will always be there. They'll always be there tomorrow. They'll always be there the next day. So there's no need particularly to have them now. There's no need to binge on them. And if you want a small bit of something, have that. And if you want a small bit again tomorrow, you can have it again tomorrow, and you can have it the day after, but just don't have all of it now because it's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah. We live in this amazing first world country, or, this world where there are the opportunities all over the place. And so, we're blessed to be able to have that.
Yep.
So in terms of fat loss, like in workouts, that's a question I get asked all of the time. It's like, what's the best type of workout, both strength training and cardio, for fat loss?
Well, I always like to, programming doesn't change too much for me in terms of strength between fat loss and muscle gain, really. I think that the best thing kind of for maintaining muscle, maintaining strength when you're dieting is the same as what built it. When you are, obviously, if you did a bulk phase, then for me, that's going to be kind of a mixture of stuff. So it's obviously for strength stuff, kind of more lower rep, higher load type work, factoring in some kind of moderate stuff and some lighter stuff as well. I don't tend to tweak training too much in terms of going into a fat loss phase. So obviously you might start getting weaker just due to reduced body weight. Some reduced body fat is also going to have an impact on your strength. And same time, if your calories decrease, you might not have quite the same amount of energy. So I try and kind of maintain volume, potentially by doing more sets at a lighter weight, but still keeping it relatively sort of low to moderate rep. What I would probably do though is obviously, along with kind of reducing calories in the diet, would be to add some sort of cardio. And that would usually come in the form of tends to be a mixture, and I like to base it off personal preference. Again, going with that idea of flexibility and freedom, and what someone's going to stick to best. So my go-to would be kind of a mixture of low intensity stuff and some sort of high intensity steady state. High intensity intervals even. But it depends what people like. So sometimes if they want circuits or complexes, we'll do some of that. Might put a finisher at the end of a few workouts. So, some metabolic type stuff with some kettlebells or bodyweight moves. But at the same time, I used to be kind of a big advocate of HIIT training. And actually now I'm finding that, particularly with female clients where stress levels can get quite high with dieting, I'll often actually just add an extra activity. So tell them to kind of walk for 30 minutes a day instead, because obviously still burning calories, but hasn't got quite the same stress response. They'll recover better. So a mix of kind of personal preference and obviously time scales as well, because if they've only got 30 minutes a week to add some cardio in, that's going to be HIIT training. If they've got can spare sort of half an hour a day, then we'll probably just do some walking or some light activity to get the calorie burn up.
Interesting. So when you say for the strength training, the different types of workouts that you would put together would be something that would include squats, deadlifts, things like that, and separating out leg and or lower body, upper body days, or how do you typically structure those workouts?
Pretty much. I mean, every program, provided the person can do it, has got a variation of the big three. So it's got some sort of squat, some sort of deadlift, some sort of bench press. Mm-hmm. I typically like hitting muscle groups 2 to 3 times a week. So that would generally be an upper lower split, maybe a full body. Might even be kind of push pull legs type thing if they've got an extra day to train, so they can do 6 days a week or so. And yeah, typically I'll try and get people back squatting, but obviously not everyone wants to or even can back squat. So some front squats or safety bar squats, anything like that. Same with deadlifts, conventional deadlift if possible, or conventional or sumo, but likewise, if they can't, there'll be some deficit deadlifts, some rack pulls, anything like that. But I suppose my go-to split would be some sort of upper lower. So one kind of more strength-based day for each and one more sort of moderate rep range day for each, with accessory stuff thrown in depending on goals really. So if they're powerlifters, it'd be more kind of variation of the big three. If they wanted more kind of bodybuilding type stuff, and you do a bit more isolation work, and for fat loss might even be kind of a few circuits and things like that, just to get kind of calorie burn and heart rate up again.
So for the most part, if your goal is to, build some muscle but lean out, you just want to make sure you're lifting heavy for you, especially in the beginning, challenging yourself, working in the top 3, the big 3, like you said. That's kind of a very general way to think about it.
I think so, yeah. And it's that idea of, as I said, sort of challenging yourself and pushing yourself. So I'll always advocate strength training and training heavy relative to what the person can do. But that doesn't mean I'll get everyone kind of performing singles, doubles and triples on back squats, for instance, or doing 8 sets of 3 or something. It might be that their lowest reps they go to is 8, but as long as they're progressing some way week on week, whether that's in sets, whether it's in reps, in weight, even reducing rest time, doing a bit more volume, then I'm kind of happy really. Obviously, if someone wants to get into powerlifting, it's different. You are going to need to be lifting heavy and going sort of 85% plus of 1 rep max. But provided someone's, say, challenging themselves and lifting relatively heavy weights, then I'm happy if they're making progress and getting stronger.
Yeah. And do you recommend your clients definitely have a rest day per week, or how do you typically structure rest?
Yeah, I like kind of 1 complete rest day, or if not complete rest, then just some low intensity cardio. So walking or swimming or a yoga class or something. I suppose typically I'd set people up with 3 to 5 weight training days and 1 to 2 cardio. So it'd always be sort of one more or less complete rest day in there. And again, I'm a big fan of scheduling deloads in. So some people are going to need sort of quite a or very light deload really. If someone's quite advanced and training really heavy, they might have 1 week every 4 where they're going really light just to let themselves recover, let their joints and nervous system rest up. Other people might be a case of just, I don't know, maybe taking 2 consecutive workouts in a 6 or 7 week block and saying, just train at 50% or even skip these 2 workouts. But I actually find with a lot of clients, due to kind of work and family commitments, that doesn't always need to be scheduled, or they might be away on a trip for 4 or 5 days. So you can say to them, just do some mobility stuff, do some bodyweight work, and actually that might not need to be scheduled. But yeah, I think that obviously you need to push it hard in the gym, but at the same time, rest is really important. And actually, one of the biggest factors, I think, in long-term progress is scheduling in those deloads and those rest days.
Yeah, I think that's a big like misunderstanding, is that sometimes people think, man, I'm hitting a plateau, I need to push harder. And if they're already pushing really hard, then they don't realize a lot of times it could be hormones. Like, you need to give your body that rest in order for it to like sync back up and get back into that fat burning mode, or where it feels safe to be able to release, versus like starting to hang on to everything because you're just pushing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's one of the reasons why, as I said earlier, I've got more into kind of prescribing some extra steady state stuff rather than always going high intensity on the cardio. Actually, was a lecture recently, the guy called James Krieger, and he was saying some quite interesting stuff about NEAT and kind of calorie burn through the day. If your body is really kind of stressed and beat up and you're training super hard all the time, then your body kind of subconsciously down regulates the amount of calories you burn at rest. So, you start to burn fewer while you're sleeping, while you're sitting at your desk. And actually, one of the best ways to sort of, recharge that and get your metabolism ramped up and calorie burn ramped up is to kind of ease off a bit on the training. So, while I've got no particular kind of case studies to back it up or anything, I have noticed that actually, if someone's struggling, give them a deload week, tell them to kind of cut the cardio down. Even sort of a diet break with upping the calories by just a small number for a week or two can be, again, it's the best thing for long-term fat loss, really. And I think 99% of people should probably have that idea of long-term sustainability in mind.
Yeah, that's true. I was going to bring up the diet as well, as I think a lot of times people will start to cut back on carbs. That's one of the things they'll think, well, I have to cut out carbs, I have to cut them down. And one of the things for me, I went through a whole experiment where I went through a reverse diet, and I, got myself up to, I think it was like 325 carbs a day or something. And I was maintaining. And to me, that was such an eye opener. It was like a little experiment of self-discovery, just to see of like how amazing the human body really is. And sometimes we think, oh, I have to control it, cut back. But really, when you support it and you give it the fuel that it needs, then it builds the muscle. The muscle, fuels like bumps up your metabolism, and everything starts really working super well, versus trying to like starve it into giving it what you need.
I think that's a big thing. People forget that calories and carbs in particular are fuel for performance, and what you do in the gym actually has a huge impact on your fat loss. So if you can perform better, and if you're stronger, and if you can recover better, then again, for long-term fat loss, that's going to be a huge factor. And so trying to starve yourself is not a great idea. Likewise, that's kind of off on a tangent, but why I'm not a huge fan of training fasted, or a lot of people say now, workout nutrition doesn't matter at all. Well, I think it kind of does, because I think if you can fuel yourself properly for your workouts, you'll have better workouts and ultimately get better results. That might not be as important as everything else, but I think it still does actually matter.
Yeah, I noticed that too. I used to always do fasted workouts, because I thought, oh no, there's no way I could work out with anything in my stomach. And I started having a shake before my workouts. And I noticed that my strength, my endurance, everything increased. And I didn't feel bloated like I thought I would. A shake's pretty easy to digest. And it really gave me that fuel to push it harder in my workouts. So I think that's so true.
Yeah, definitely. And I recently had a female client come off contest prep, and her calories were still kind of lowish, but she was sort of, obviously wanted to try and get her building some muscle and gaining some strength. And she was training fasted. She was training at like 4:30 in the morning. And I can completely understand not wanting to have a huge meal. What I said to her was just have kind of 15 grams of carbs from like some simple sugars, because rest of the day she's eating kind of pretty clean, hitting her fiber, getting her veggies in. So said, if you don't want to feel bloated, just have kind of some, I think she went for like gummy snakes or something, just have 15 grams of carbs from those. And she said the improvement in her performance was massive, and she didn't feel kind of drained after the session. She was actually feeling starving hungry after the sessions before, and just by having that kind of made a big difference. So workout nutrition for me is actually not the most important thing by any means, but it certainly does kind of matter again once you get to that level where the smaller things play a bigger part.
Yeah. And I think that's interesting that you mentioned like gummy snakes, because people might say, ooh, well, that's just sugar. Like that's not good for you. And that's when it goes back to this idea of the 80-20. Like when you are fueling your body with really high quality whole foods, the majority of the time, then things like that, like it's just sugar. Your body needs sugar in order to have energy. And so it's okay to have something like that to fuel you through your workout when you're going to be burning it off. And your body just kind of knows what to do with it, because again, it's not something that she probably just has once in a great while. It's a part of her overall balanced nutrition plan.
Yeah, exactly. So that was kind of the thing, I know from her food logs that actually she's great at getting her veggies in. She eats loads of fiber, loads of protein, hits her macros within a few grams. So for her, had I said get 15 grams of carbs from broccoli before training, she'd have probably felt bloated as anything and would have performed worse. As it was doing that, it's sustainable. She doesn't feel the need to binge on anything, and the rest of the days her like cleaner foods, I suppose. So got to base it on a client by client basis, but for her it was ideal because it made sort of better long-term results.
That's another thing to point out, another sort of tangent, is that people think, oh, well, broccoli would always be the better choice. But sometimes fiber, like you can have too much fiber. That's possible. And if you're eating only whole foods, that might happen. So that's where you have to understand, like, more fiber is not always better. And some people are more sensitive to it than others. So you can play with that kind of thing too, and just figure out like what really works well for your body, especially before a workout. It's not the best thing to have.
I completely agree. And again, some people have almost cast iron stomachs and can train after eating like a full 3-course meal. Other people, it is a case of, a shake or a piece of fruit or a handful of candy or sweets is all they can train on, really. So it's, I suppose that idea of kind of learning your body and what you tolerate best to give you best performance, really.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, that's so true. I think we might have just blown some people's minds right there with that one.
Yeah, candy can be better than broccoli.
So was there anything else that we didn't share so far that you want to make sure that we talk about in this interview, just to kind of wrap up?
I think just the idea of probably not being too hard on yourself is a big one for me as well. I think that typically, people, especially sort of the more into health and fitness you get, the harder people tend to be on themselves, and they beat themselves up for, overeating by 50 calories or for, skipping one of their exercise in the gym. And I think, again, it might make a tiny bit of difference if you're a few weeks out from a competition, but on the whole, it's not at all. And actually, people need to look more at the bigger picture. And again, that idea of being, probably 80% good all the time is much better than being sort of perfect some of the time and not on it at all the rest of the time. So just having that idea of sustainability and realizing that actually kind of health and fitness is a lifelong thing ideally. And so you want to kind of enjoy it as well. So while you need to be disciplined and have goals, there's no need to make it completely rule your life.
Yeah, that's what I always say too, is consistency over perfection. And it's really those baby steps that you take consistently over time that add up to that long-term sustainable change. And then you look back and you're like, holy moly, look what I've accomplished. And it was just by, going and doing it day after day after day. And then it sort of just becomes a part of who you are.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for this. And I just want to make sure that we give everyone a place to come and find you if they want to learn more, if they want to chat with you. And I know you had a little special gift that you were going to offer as well. So you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Best place to find me is website, which is healthylivingheavylifting.com, or the Facebook is Healthy Living Heavy Lifting, or just add me. I'm Mike Samuels on Facebook. And I have a free ebook, which you can get if you go to my site. Ebook's called 5 Reasons You're Not Losing Fat, and just goes through, the 5 main ways I've found people kind of often think they're eating healthily, but actually they might be, messing with progress. And by sort of eradicating them, you'll find you get better results. So that's just on my website, and it's free to anyone who wants to download it.
Great. Thank you so much, Mike. I think this was awesome, and I think people are going to get a lot out of it. So I really appreciate your time today.
That's okay, Sheila. Enjoyed it too. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. All right. Take care, and I will see everyone else in the next interview.